Most newsletters look exactly the same. It's text on a white background. Like, how can we make ours feel special? I come from advertising, so all that I did for a while was just art direction for brands. You can just now generate UIs. It's way more important to like be in tune with what you find beautiful about day-to-day things, and like actually like start honing on that art direction of things. You log into Gmail or Outlook and it's just like a ton of text in chronological order, and it feels like you're in a hospital or like in a government building with a lot of like fluorescent lights, and like everything is sterile and hygienic. So we wanted to create this narrative of going from like a stormy void type of like forsaken place into like a more sunshine spring, trying to do like a little bit of symbolic storytelling while we're actually like also telling that same story in here inside the text of the letter.
You might not explicitly notice it, but you'll feel it. I love those little details.
Choosing or championing more efficiency over like the emotional aspects of things, like the details that you might put on a doorknob or the manhole covers on the street or whatever, like it just definitely feels like the world is in general, or Panama at least, is not minimalist at all. It's very maximalist. I think the internet deserves more maximalism.
Lucas, welcome to the show.
What's up, man? Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. I'm so excited to do this with you for many reasons. One, because you are the original producer of this show and you designed all of the visuals for it. Two, because I just love hanging out with you. And three, because you play such a critical role at Every, and you do such a good job that I'm just really excited to bring everything you do to this podcast and let everyone see a little bit of a behind the scenes on how you work. So for people who don't know, you are the creative lead at Every, which means that you're responsible for the vibe, basically, of Every and all of our products. And I feel like people, people really like the vibe, and I love the vibe. And it's such a critical part of what it is that we do. And it's such a pleasure to get to work with you. And I'm just so happy to get to talk to you about how you do what you do.
Yeah, I think like for me, it's been a good journey so far. Thank you for reminding me that I actually used to produce this podcast. I have forgotten. I had totally forgotten about that because Vivian has been doing like a great job so far now that I totally forgot about it. And yeah, it's been a journey, but super happy to be able to vibe with y'all and get to make us look as good as possible.
Yep, totally. I've told you this before, but for people who are listening, you're kind of like the ideal, your founder's best friend. Because like you've done pretty much every job at the company. You started as doing ad sales. You just cold DM me and was like, hey, I want to work with you. And I was like, cool, that sounds fun. I don't know what you should do, but like maybe do, ad sales. And you progressed from there to like doing like helping us run courses, to doing the like producing the podcast, to now doing all of the visual design and aesthetic and all of the UI designs. So like basically everything that I throw at you, you're just like, yeah, I'll figure that out. And you do, which is really great. And it's so fun to get to work with you on this stuff. But I think the place I want to start is, this is very relevant to the audience, is you're someone whose career I've seen transform by using AI. Like I remember when you first, we first started working together. I used to have you CC me on all the sales emails you were sending because, your English is great, but like your written English when we first started working together was like every once in a while there'd be like a little thing, and I'm very sensitive to this stuff where it was like, it wasn't quite perfect. And I just remember when ChatGPT came out, your email suddenly became like perfect, like overnight. And that might seem like a small thing, but it's really not, because that was the moment where I was like, now I don't have to watch your emails, and now I can give you more responsibility. I can like let you manage the courses that we're doing. And you could have done that before, but just like the communication is just so much easier that now I can like give that to you without having to worry about it. And same thing for like the image generation, like, when Dolly and Midjourney started to come out, you started to be like, oh, now I can do all the like art for like the site. And so, all the images that we do for all the stuff we publish, like, you just started doing that stuff, and it was like amazing. So every time there's a new AI tool, or you remember you built that like AI summarizer for our Sunday Digest, every time there's a new AI tool, you just like dive in, and it has just like completely changed, I think, the trajectory of your career. So I just wanted to like talk about that with you. Like, what's that experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, just being at Every and the fact that like AI is baked into everything that we do, write about, or even talk about in all of our meetings just makes me more inclined to jumping into like all of this sort of stuff. But just so you know, like not just my emails in English are now perfect, but also my Spanish emails, because like I'm like a terrible typer in general. Like I speak way better than I express myself with like my hands, I guess, with like using a keyboard or like or just like writing by hand. Like just I'm like terrible. Like grammar is like the bane of my existence. And I think like when we started like using, I think it was like 3.5 when it originally came out, that I knew that like the emails needed to be better, and like I knew what I wanted to say, but it was like so easy just to like grab like what I wanted to say and just say like fix it or make it at least sound coherent,
Yeah.
and then like grab that, and it was like already like perfect, So like it's not like I never thought of it as like, oh, the AI is writing the emails for me. It's like the AI is making sense out of me not making sense, or at least out of my incoherentness, or
Translating, maybe.
yeah, it's like translating to like the correctness, and I guess like I've just always been more of a visual person, that I've never really bothered so much into jumping on like writing so much, which is kind of like ironic, because like now I've written 2 pieces for a media company here. Even like text models, just like because like a lot of the work that I do is very visual. So like how do text models help in that way? But I do think like using 3.5 like allowed me to sort of like it unlocked this sort of feeling that I had in my head of like everything is sort of like figure outable, like before it was like, oh, I don't know how to do that, so I can't help you, but there's like this little thing that like AI did that is like everything is figure outable now. So it just kind of like allowed me to want to like take more than I knew that I could do without it, if that makes sense.
Totally. I think a lot of people listening and watching, if they're already familiar with Every, then like one of the reasons they might be excited to listen to this episode is because they're just like, I love Every's aesthetic. Like, how do you even do that? I hope people feel that way. I feel that way. Tell me about that. Like, how do you think about the aesthetic that we have, and how did you come to it, and how do you think about putting it out every day?
Yeah, well, I think it maybe makes sense to go a little bit back. I come from advertising, so like all that I did for like a while was just art direction for brands. So based on that, like I noticed right away working at Every that there was really no like art direction, or like there wasn't really like anything super cohesive. So I always had like that itch, which I never was able to scratch because I was doing like ad sales or something else or whatever. And for a while we were just like everybody, like each writer was like in charge of like their own cover images. So like that created like a lot of inconsistencies. Everybody had like different prompting styles. Everybody was using Dali, but still like everybody was just prompting differently. And I just noticed that like there was room for creating something that felt special or that felt interesting enough. And I remember we did a lot of like iterations and back and forth to make sure that like, oh, this feels at least aligned with like what we're trying to do as a brand or as a company. But I just like I knew that like we needed to pop, because I think like most newsletters look exactly the same. It's text on a white background. Like how can we make ours feel special? And I guess like that's something that I try to look at a lot of the things that I work through. or at least that's a lens that I put on for like a lot of the work that we do together. Just because like it's easy to kind of like fall into just keeping things looking the way that they are, but I don't know, like there's really an opportunity to kind of like delight people just by like pouring your soul into like tiny little details and things like that, and I really enjoy that.
Definitely. And how do you describe like what it is, like what the aesthetic even is?
Yeah, so I would say the way that I usually talk about it is like neoclassical pop art. That's like the simplest way, because it has like a lot of hints and symbols and elements that are like more reserved for like the Baroque period or like neoclass or like Greco-Roman type of aesthetics, columns, architecture,
Like statues and like stuff like
yeah, like statues and things that are normally more connected to like that classical aesthetic. But that's like so old school as well. You know, that's like something you would see in a museum. And like museums, I've never, I mean, at least me personally, I've never felt like a museum is particularly like fun. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to a museum and I'm going to learn and I'm going to like get inspired and things like that. But like, we are a web company, you know, at the end of the day, and like there's so much noise in the webs. How do we stand out? And like I remember talking with you a lot about how we are sort of like talking about the future, but from a lens from like the now and the past, and like how the past tells the future and sort of like that. So a lot of those like themes sort of like got translated into the designs where like how can we make like all these classical super vintage type of aesthetics or like feel alive and feel electric and like add a little bit of like, you know, energy to it. And I think like that's where all the saturated like colors came from, like the crazy lines and all of that sort of stuff, while still keeping a lot of that classical vibe in there.
yeah. One of the things we talk about a lot is the idea of dynamic tensions, like playing with opposites. So you might think in order to create a brand, it's like, well, is it new or old? And I think for us, one thing that's really important to me is playing with the tension between new and old, and bringing in elements of both to create something that feels new and a little bit more alive. Because you know, something about Every is like we have it's a future, hopefully future focused company, future forward company, but we have a lot of respect for and awareness of the history of, for example, great publishing companies and magazines and all that kind of stuff that that like came before us. And I really love trying to take some of the glamour or aspiration of those sorts of old style things, and then bringing them back in a new way that feels fresh and about the future and all that kind of stuff. And I think that produces something really, really interesting. There's a particular art style called Art Deco, from like, I think it's from like early 1900s. That was also something that we talked about a lot, where it was really trying to be about the future, but it's from the past. And that's like a really cool like thing to me. And I think you're really good at playing with those kinds of tensions.
Yeah, I think like there's that at least to me that's what makes design interesting, you know, because like there's a lot of like low hanging fruit in like design, you know, because you can easily look up for a swipe file or go to Pinterest and just kind of like replicate what kind of like resonates with you. But at the same time, that's not necessarily sort of like creating like a new provocation in like the person that is like viewing it or whatever. And I think like, I mean, I'm not a writer, you know, like by trade, but I know how like the choice of syntax, the choice of like where you put a comma or like whatever, it's all about like sort of like creating a rhythm, creating like a certain feeling and things like that. And I think like there's a lot of ways that like visuals and designs sort of like work in a similar way, you know, like just like even adding very simple details like a very slight grain texture like automatically puts it a little bit in the past and like gives you a little bit of that vibe, you know, and depends on how you use it and things like that. But I do think like there is something really interesting about like really taking things that like maybe shouldn't work together or that you think like perhaps you don't normally see them together, And I think like that's what makes it interesting because it's more unexpected, you know?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is also unique about your design taste and design vibe that's actually a little bit different from me is I'm a little bit more maybe minimalist and understated visually. I'm more of a verbal person than I am a visual person anyway. But if I'm doing visual stuff, I'm a little bit more minimalist. And I think you can do minimalism really well, but you also really like bright colors and saturated stuff and stuff that like pops. And what's really funny is actually, so we were, you're in Panama right now. You're from Panama. And we spent some time together on Bocas del Toro for a month, like last month, which was awesome. It's also where I flew off my motorcycle and my wrist, but that's a story for another time. And when I was coming back from Bocas, I spent some time in Panama City, just a day, and I ended up walking around, and it's so colorful. Like all of the buildings are these beautiful like greens and pinks and reds and purples and like all this stuff that like the outsides of the buildings that you wouldn't really expect. And it just made me, I don't know if you've ever consciously connected that, but it made me connect to a lot of the like the saturation in what you do, because it just feels like to me a reflection a little bit of Panama City actually.
Well, I've never thought about it that way. So it's really interesting what you're saying, because like it just made me think about like a story that I have no idea if it's true or if it's not. But basically, like I heard that in Panama City, a lot of or in Panama in general, a lot of houses and like small buildings and things like that are painted in like very sort of like not like normal colors or neutral colors like we would be used to, you know, like light beige or like white or whatever. And it's mostly because those are like the colors that are most in demand, so they are the most expensive, you know, like buying white paint or buying like slight light yellow. It's like more expensive than like buying lime green paint, because who would paint their house light green, right? So it was like it kind of like came out of like a limitation, I guess, but it trickled into like a visual sort of aesthetic that like it's really kind of interesting and tropical and very representative of the region. The difference obviously is that like pixels are free, and like the colors that you choose from the color picker are really free. But I do think like maybe there is something towards like Panama City and like the tropicality of it, and like the sort of the architecture and the how picturesque like a lot of the landscapes are, that maybe like has trickled into like some of design. Because I do notice that like I'm not like a super minimalist person in general, but I also think it's like if you, for example, look at like the portfolio of a designer from like Norway or like Sweden, it's probably gonna look like an IKEA, super like minimalist, super sleek, and like mine is totally the opposite of that, you know.
Yeah.
and I think it's mainly just because like I respect minimalism and I think like it's great, but at the same time I have like a love-hate relationship with it, because like minimalism kind of like came up in like the tech world thanks to like Braun and like Apple, that were really kind of like championing like only having the bare essentials in like the final sort of like composition or final thing, which is all about like getting rid of excess and like whatever you don't need and things like that, which I think it's great. But like our world is each time more and more full of technology, and technology is becoming like such an important part of our life that like it sort of seems like we're kind of like choosing or championing more like efficiency and like these types of things over like the emotional aspects of things, like the details that you might put on a doorknob, or the details that you might like put into like the manhole covers on the street or whatever, you know. Like it just definitely feels like the world is in general, or Panama at least, is not minimalist at all. It's very maximalist. And I think like the web has sort of like been following this same pattern of like, hey, let's minimize everything. But I don't know. I think the internet deserves more maximalism, you know, more attention, more stuff, you know, especially now because like everybody can just like generate a UI or generate something. And since it's trained on patterns and everybody loves minimalism, it's just spitting out more minimalism, and the web is just gonna like get drenched in minimalism.
Yeah. I sort of see it as like things come in waves. Like, I don't know how you feel about early Apple stuff, but like a lot of the, not early, but like early as in, I don't know, probably the 2000s to like early 2010s, probably really the 2000s. Like they had those like really bright clamshell MacBooks, or like the early, a lot of the early iPhone UI was very skeuomorphic, and it had all these like details, like grained leather of like, I can't remember what it was, like your address book. It had like the sewing pattern on it and stuff like that. And then over the next 10 years, it became much, much, much more minimal. And then now I feel like we're blossoming back into a lot of what we talk about is like maximalism and nostalgia as like two of the maybe hallmarks of whatever this new AI aesthetic is. Talk about that. What do you see as like being the kind of the aesthetic that's coming up?
What I'm noticing more is like designers feeling more empowered to spend more time on art direction, because like that's usually been like a very separate role, or it's been something that like maybe comes after you're thinking about functionality and things like that. So it always sort of like takes like a backseat. But I do think like now I feel it in the air, you know, like this feeling of like people wanting to bring in more things that you wouldn't see normally on the web, you know, like more organic things. So like clouds are like the perfect example of something that is super like overly used now, but like adding like landscapes, adding like textures, adding like very things that feel like there was like a human hand involved in it are really sort of like starting to appear more in my timeline, and I see it like more often in like in designs that I see around. And I think a lot of that is probably coming from like a similar feeling that I'm having, that like if we are all sort of like regressing into that mean of minimalism, we're not gonna like stand out. So like I feel that there is definitely like a trend for people to try to like, push the limits, I guess, of what like is expectable to happen in like a screen or a frame or things like that, you know, or like what is expected to be inside of a frame. So like I see people using like paper textures now more than before on like specific like components and things like that, and also like more interesting animations that feel a little bit more organic. And I'm using the word organic a lot just because you can, even if it might or might not be AI generated, it definitely feels more like there was a human like pushing the things versus like a computer cursor or something like that. And I see a lot of people also bringing back a lot of like the skeuomorphism that you were talking about, but more related to like buttons and like more tactile surfaces and like interactive components and things like that, which is also like really, really interesting. And I do think like it's like in Spanish we have this phrase which is para los gustos los colores, which means for the tastes the colors. So like you basically like everybody likes something different. Everybody has like a different taste or a different idea of like what's good, but kind of like how you were saying, there's like waves of like what's the most popular sort of like design right now. And I think you're spot on that like as soon as like ChatGPT released the new image generation model, people started experimenting to see if like they could create their own UI kits in Ghibli mode or things like that, which is interesting. I don't know how long that will last before like it starts feeling boring or repetitive. But that's what's exciting, you know, because like who knows what's next.
Yeah. Another really interesting thing that you've been kind of tracking is it's not necessarily just an aesthetic, but it's how AI might change what a website even is. You know, tell me about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because like I think we were talking about it in Bocas a little bit too. But like there is so like a website is basically like a building, right? Like it has like its own architecture, and like somebody built it thinking about like how are people gonna like be inside of that space. So it's like I think like I tend to look at building products or building websites and things like that a little bit more akin to like digital architecture, right? Like you're building sort of like spaces for people on the web, and um, but everybody's house sort of looks the same. everybody's house, you're like taking the same hallway and like taking a right in the same sort of way because we've fallen into the same sort of like UI patterns, or like what is the most accessible flow or whatever. And like usability is great, and like you want to make the life of your users better, of course. But isn't it amazing when you're like lost in a museum and you don't know like where you want to like turn next, and you can just sort of like explore and get lost, like, and like dive into it, or like or on a haunted house, or like when you are like in a beautiful park, you know, and like you can just sort of like stroll around and like spend some time. And I think like we're spending more and more time inside of our screens and inside of our laptops, and like it seems like that's just gonna be more and more. So like, why don't we bring a little bit of that like serendipity, or like that type of I don't know, like randomness that exists in architecture that's been sort of like thought out for like specific purposes into the way that like we interact with our products. I don't know how that translates to like a SaaS product where you just want to like do something very specific, but I think like it opens up the question, you know, to like at least think about it before like just following the pattern, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have examples? Like, I want to look at one together of something that you're inspired by right now and just talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a really cool example is the website that I saw recently for Mainframe, Jordan Singer's new company, Mainframe. They have like a really, really sleek website, and I've spent like a lot of time in it just trying to figure out how they did some of the things they did, because I have no idea specifically like how some textures or some SVGs were rendered in a way that like looks so responsive and great. But
show me, share your screen.
Yeah. Let me share my screen. Awesome. Okay. So there is this website that I really, really like, which is the landing page for Mainframe. And what I have no idea how they made is like this border texture. Because like I have, it looks like it could be a picture, you know, and like you can like zoom in and like really notice like the intricate details. But like what's interesting is like that this is like super responsive, and like I have no idea how even to like approach something like that. So I just thought like that was interesting.
That's interesting. Let me stop you there. So for people who are listening and not watching, basically what Mainframe has is it looks almost like you're looking at a terminal. And like, you know, like a black terminal, like DOS terminal type thing. So that's sort of back to the like retro nostalgia stuff that we were talking about. But what they have around that is this like, it's almost like a beige, maybe sort of metallic-y border. What it looks like to me is like one of those really old monitors from like the 90s. So it's like the border, it's a border that looks like it's a monitor. And as you resize it, the monitor resizes too, which is pretty cool. It's like a sort of CRT kind of monitor, I think.
Yeah, and it has like shadows, and like it looks like it has depth, you know, like it looks like the screen is even like further away than like what it is, you know, and like that's like super skeuomorphic, and it's something that like you are not seeing in day-to-day design in like a random website you come in and visit, you know. What I think it's also like really, really cool is that the entire experience happens inside of like this terminal, you know, and like the type of art direction that they choose, it's also like super reminiscent of like older type of like UI from like the older days of like, I don't know, like before, before that, who knows, you know, like it's like really, really interesting how like the art direction and the storytelling throughout the entire thing, because like this landing page is sort of like their manifesto in a way. They're kind of like telling the story of their company and what they believe in design, but they are like using sort of like very simple basic elements that are from, you know, like that you could find like in a terminal, just like lines and things like that, or dots, for example, to make something that feels like truly unique. And yeah, I just see this as an example of a website that I would love to maybe build something like this for us to someday, like not exactly this, but just something that feels like, oh, I'm in an experience. Like a website should feel more like like you had an experience versus like a flyer, you know? And I think like a lot of design tends to look like a digital version of a flyer. but I think like there is a lot of room to kind of like play with things to make them feel like, I don't know, like really unique and like wanted to share them in a podcast.
I agree. I like one of the other ways I think this could come out is like, I'm an investor in this company called Portola, and they do these AI characters called Tolans.
Oh yeah.
And we'll have Quentin, who's the founder, will be on the show in a couple weeks, and that's another thing where you're interacting with a piece of software, but it's a personality. And everyone's talking about like, agentic AI and blah, 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 whatever. And Tolan is a consumer thing, but I actually think that that's also going to happen for like, the marketer agent that you use is going to, Devin's going to have a personality, and you're going to like a particular Devin because it like has a specific voice and way of interacting. And that is an experience. It's a way of having an experience with technology that wasn't really possible before. And there's all these new design constraints there that are not just, it's about the prompt and the information the knowledge it has and whatever, but it's also about how do you present that visually so that you get the sense that there's someone there that you're talking to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think like even like with like voice, that's like an entire like new paradigm that I really have never even like ventured to design for, or like audio in general, and I think like it's definitely becoming more important. I played with the Tolans recently, and it was like awesome. Like the whole onboarding experience is like extremely delightful. So like props to that entire team if they're listening. But yeah, I think like that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like obviously like that feels super amazing and fresh because like they are targeting like the specific like end users, which might be kids, might not be, but like at the end of the day, like it feels like oh, you're like inside of a show, or like you're inside of a movie, and that's sort of like exactly what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, you might have like design limitations, but that doesn't mean that like you have to like follow the same sort of like patterns or things like that. You might still have the same problems, but still like are you trying to have fun, or are you trying to just like follow the wave, instead of like making it, I guess. And totals are fun.
Yeah, definitely. I want you to show us some stuff. Like, I know you have a couple things you want to show us. Where should we start?
Yeah, I think something cool that we could start with is maybe giving people like a little bit of a behind the scenes on how we make a lot of our images, things like that.
I'd love that. Let's do that.
Yeah, totally. I'll share my screen again.
Please.
So obviously the new ChatGPT model is great for images, and I've been playing with it, but so far, most of our images have been being generated inside of Midjourney. And you can see sort of like a lot of the type of prompting that we use here. But so basically, Midjourney is like the place where I tend to start with like super simple prompts, like, for example, like a black and white vintage Greco-Roman sculpture of two hands shaking in a white studio background. And like, this is the origin of the idea. Like, oh, I might want to have these two hands for a specific design that we need to do. And in this case, this is for the consulting side. So you'll see that like in the every/consulting side, we use something that is sort of like a variation of that. And like that's sort of like where we started in a very different place of where we ended up to. And if you want, I can sort of like describe what we're looking at. But
let's do that. Yeah, please describe for people who are listening.
Yeah, totally. So like a lot of our style is very, as I said, Greco-Roman or classical. So like we use a lot of statues and like marble sculptures and like vintage illustrations. And like for the consulting website, we wanted to kind of like show the collaboration or between like you and an AI, or you and machine, and how you can basically do more because of the collaboration. So I kind of like wanted to start exploring that in Midjourney here. Yeah, so like, for example, this is sort of like how you can see how it kind of like was evolving between like robot hands only, and then like also human hands, and then like we had like these types of images that are very horizontal and like a lot of like hand details that are kind of like described as engraving or like line
Let me
drawings.
stop you. Let me stop you there and just describe a little bit about what I'm seeing for people who are listening. So did you start with those first hands that you showed? Is that what you started with?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if we go to the very bottom of this, like we should start seeing some of that.
So basically, like that first thing that we saw was two human hands that looked almost like a little bit like statues-ish, like Greek statues that were doing fist bumps. And I can't. Can you bring that up again? Can you find that?
Let me see. Sorry about that. I don't have them organized in here.
No worries. That's totally fine. So you started with like two human hands that look like statues that are like Greco-Roman statues that are shaking hands. And that idea for you, like you were working on the consulting site and you're like, I want to show humans and AIs collaborating. That's where it came from.
Yeah, and especially like kind of like following like our same aesthetic and like our own visual style. This kind of like laid the at least the layout or the composition, because I knew like I wanted something coming from like both ends of the screen. So I knew I needed like a super horizontal image, and like a handshake or a fist bump just kind of like felt like extremely natural for that type of position, if that makes sense.
And the prompt uses black and white vintage Greco-Roman sculpture of two hands shaking in a white studio background. Why white studio background and why black and white?
Okay, those are two great questions. I tend to finish everything up in Photoshop. So for example, something that I would normally do is that like I would upscale this and then like I would just download it and put it inside of Photoshop. And once that happens, when you have white backgrounds or when you have like black and white assets, it becomes a cleaner image in general, or the outputs are cleaner or like are usually like less noisy. And that means that it's easier to isolate assets when you're using like specific tools. So for example, like Photoshop, now that they have like a lot of like AI image like selection tools, you can just do really simple things like select subject. And because the image is just so clean in the way that it's presented because of the white studio background and like that sort of stuff, it's like really easy to just like isolate exactly what you need.
Right. And
like
what you just did for people who are listening, like you open up Photoshop, you put it in there and you just press that select subject button and it just highlighted all of the two hands basically and not the background. Okay. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. And then like basically because it's like that, I can just like select the subject and I can just add a mask and then I have removed the background like automatically and I can start playing with our style faster and things like that.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so let's go back. So, okay, so then tell me a little bit. So then we sort of fast forward, and you've got like now it's like you're going through different iterations of it, where it's sort of started to turn into like machine hands, basically. Let's find the first one of those.
Yeah, here it's like the human versions of them. And then I don't know if these ones are ordered chronologically or if like the oldest ones are like the first ones. Not sure really how these ones get ordered. But basically here you can sort of like see the whole progression between like the different elements and me just like playing with a lot of like separate elements. Because like you might not know this, but the one that we have here, it's like literally like I didn't get that in like a one shot. It's like I got one hand that worked well in like one output and I got a robot hand in another output that worked well. And I like merged them in Photoshop and got the final output in that way. But like you'll see here that like, for example, like I think this hand actually is the one that we have. No, that's not it. But it's like some specific hand from one of these ones. I think it might have been this one. I think it's this one, actually, the one on the right. I think it got flipped and put in here. And then like another robot hand from another output looked good enough in that sense. So like it's all about sort of like exploring a lot and just like having a lot of outputs because like unfortunately it's a lot like a slot machine when you're prompting images, you know. So it's just like looking at the whole option space and having a little bit of a vision for what you want to do. Because like if you're prompting without a vision, then everything works, right? But
Yeah. Well, tell me about like how you're doing these different, like, what are you adding? Are you just pressing go, like pressing generate again and again and again? Or how are you like iterating through these different options to find something that you like?
Yeah, so you'll see that a lot of the things we might do are sometimes like the prompt might change just very slightly. Like, for example, black and white vintage Greco-Roman illustration of a human hand fist bumping in a white background. And then I might just change that to a human hand and a robot hand, right? And see how that changes things. And then in some other prompts, it might just be just one human hand. And I just want to see like how one looks itself by itself. And then something else that I tend to do a lot is vary. So, for example, there is this feature inside of Midjourney that they let you like, for example, if there I really like this image, but it's not quite right just yet, I can just like vary it subtly, and it'll just generate something that is like super close to the. I don't know if it's the seed token or the specific like parameters that they use to like generate this one in a very similar way, and that way I get closer if I need to. And what I also do is that, for example, I might want to keep trying the same prompt because I think there is something important in this prompt, but I want this image here to do a little bit more driving or have a little bit more weight. So you can literally go in here and use the image. So it adds the image as a parameter here on the top, and it adds more weight to that image specifically. And then that way I'm like driving the results closer in this specific direction. And that's at least the way that I use, that I drive with Midjourney, kind of like slightly adjusting the prompt here and there, and then like varying the outputs and feeding the images back that I like to kind of like keep steering it in one particular direction until like something feels good enough as an asset so that I can bring it into Photoshop and finalize.
How are you, how are you thinking about, and how's your usage breaking down between 4.0 native image generation and Midjourney now? Because that just 4.0 native image generation just came out. It's like the big hot thing. We actually had access to it for a couple weeks before. I think all of us internally were like, wow, this is actually really great. Are you still using Midjourney? Like, what's your usage breakdown?
Yeah, so I think like it, like so far in the last week or so, 2 weeks, I don't know how long it's been since it came out, but I've been using it more. Specifically, let me see if we can pinpoint it in actually in the wild here.
And for people who are listening, you're on the Every website and you're looking through all of our cover images.
Exactly.
Yeah, which you designed this whole thing front to back, so people should know that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool what we can do when we work together. But for example, like I don't think I would have ever been able to do something like this in Midjourney. This
is a OpenAI logo as a statue on a white background or
exactly
background.
Because the new image gen model in ChatGPT is extremely good at prompt adherence, and it has a very good like sense of the world and like logos and people's faces and things like that, just because of its training set. So like I can literally ask it to generate a marble statue of the OpenAI logo, and I'll get it. But in Midjourney, I'm going to get something that looks kind of like it. But when you're working with logos, it's like it's either it or it isn't, right? Like there's no in between, really. So for that one specifically, we used it also like for some images that we want to kind of like sketch out like real people. We also used it there because it's really good at sort of like translating like or retexturizing at least something specific. But and then this is the first time we did a GPT 4.0 image for here that was completely done 100% without Photoshop at all.
Mm-hmm. And it's a statue of a woman holding up, it looks like maybe an iPad or, like a tablet of some kind with a picture on it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like the way that I made this was like really, really interesting because like what I did was, I don't know if I can find the chat. Maybe I can. But basically, I fed it our entire like.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh yeah, sorry for the distraction here. But
Don't
yeah,
apologize. That's really cool. Is this a Cora 404 page?
yeah, I was just like trying to get some ideas and things like that,
I love
like what it
that.
could be. Obviously, like we can't just use an image because it's not the most responsive element, but it kind of like serves as a lot of creative inspiration around what it could be, right?
Yeah.
But there was one chat that I did recently where I was able to create like a mood board of a lot of images that we have done before. Let me see if this works. Yeah, so like for example, like I could technically give it like a mood board, and right now we're looking at a mood board of just like a bunch of images that we've used for certain articles in the past, and then I think for this one specifically, I was just trying to test. So like it didn't work in this sense, but I was trying to test for a specific article that we ran recently in Super Organizers. I just tried fitting in the article and see what it would do with it for like a thumbnail. And it just kind of did it all right. You know, it's definitely like similar to our style, but it's just kind of like boring and like not it. So I kind of like gave up here in this conversation. But I found it like really interesting that you could just like feed in a mood board and get an output. And that's exactly how we generated this other image out of like just asking for another image for an article where we're talking about like OpenAI's new image generation model.
That's interesting. Yeah, I bet like that might have worked a little bit better if it wasn't just a mood board, but it had some sense of what the articles were about.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, article, maybe headline and first paragraph, plus this is the image that came out of that. And you did that a couple times and had it build a little style guide for itself. And then do style guide, visual mood board, draw something like that. Maybe could work.
I mean, that could be like an interesting experiment, even, you know, like just to like fit this and like give it like an output. What I found is that if I don't give it like a lot of direction, because like this model is really good at like picking up on like a lot of the extensiveness of your prompt. But if I keep my prompts like really, really basic, it'll just always sort of like go to the background color of the first image, for example. And like it'll just output it. I don't know why, but it just kind of like keeps happening, or that's at least something that I find, at least from my own experience. So I kind of like feel when I was using Midjourney just for image generation and to create like the basic element assets, it'd be kind of like, oh, I get to pick the background, I get to like pick all of these sort of things, but then in ChatGPT, I have to sort of like pick a background color and ask it to like do it correctly. But if I want to change it, then I gotta like wait 5 minutes, you know, versus like just doing it in Photoshop. So there's like pros and cons, and I think like eventually like the way that this is gonna like end up working is that like this is all gonna be like layers, and you're gonna be able to like control every little aspect of it. But until then, like there's still a lot of prompt work that needs to be done to get to like the right place.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else? Anything else you wanted to show?
Yeah, like for example, here I was just trying to see like if it could create like 4 new images in our style. But as you see, like the first image was like in that same color, and it was like a similar woman as that other first image. So I kind of felt like, oh, it's basing itself too much from that first image. But I thought that was interesting. Something else that I think could be cool to maybe share could be like the Cora website, if you're into
let's talk about Cora.
Yeah, awesome.
I think this is some of your best work, and you've done a lot of really great work, but I think this is some of your best work.
Oh, thank you so much. Let me log out so that we get to see the whole thing. And this work took a village. There was a lot of people involved in this and a lot of revisions, and it took a village for sure. So
it did. So we're looking at a landing page. The landing page says it's for Cora, which it manages your email with AI. We can go into exactly what it is. We have an episode with Kieran, who's the GM of Cora, a couple episodes ago, and the top says we all dread email. It's an endless to-do list written by everyone else all at once. And as you scroll, the email is kind of like there's a bunch of emails on the page, and it goes into this little envelope, and then the envelope closes, and there's like a really cool every stamp on the envelope, and then a little letter pops out, and it's a little letter about like what email why email sucks, but like how it could actually be really great. And the background is really cool here. It's turning from like dark to like brightness, like a beautiful field instead of like a stormy night. And then we finally get to Cora, your inbox is a story delivered twice a day, get delivered from email, which I think is a great line. And yeah, that's the page. So tell us about that. Tell us about how you thought about it, how it came together, what your favorite parts are, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think these ended up looking very differently than we were originally thinking about it, which is really cool. It kind of like shows you how like the creative process can just take you in like very different places. But I think it just had a lot to do with like the story that we wanted to tell, like from all of our meetings and everything that we were sort of talking about Cora and like why we were doing it and like why we were even spending so much time and effort, to build like a new email tool. And it was basically all around the fact that like, like the general email experience is like not pretty, like you log into Gmail or Outlook and it's just like a ton of text in chronological order, endless, forever, and it just like feels like you're in a hospital or like in a government building with a lot of like fluorescent lights and like everything is sterile and hygienic and it's like, oh, everything is like I don't know, like it's definitely not like a place where I want to spend like all my day. And like we are a newsletter company, so we do like lots of emails. So like how can we make the email experience at least feel better, or at least the story that we want to tell on this landing page. So we kind of like wanted to create this narrative of like going from I don't know, like a stormy void type of like forsaken place into like a more like sunshine, like spring type of vibe where like the birds are singing and like everybody's having a good time and like that's possible thanks to like this new tool. Kind of like trying to do like a little bit of symbolic storytelling while we're actually like also telling that same story in here inside the text of the letter. And
it's one of those things where you might not explicitly notice it, but you'll feel it. I love those little details.
Yeah, and it's something that like you might not notice it, but like maybe you notice it the second time or the third time, and then like it's like that little nice surprise that like like, oh, these people like really cared, and like that's at least something that I want anybody that sees our work to feel like that we care, that we really care about like what they're playing with or like touching. So we can like put a lot of attention to like, oh, let's add a paper texture to this and like a little stamp. Then like we kind of like keep using those same elements for all this, and then like all the little like blue elements that we use for the different like product features and things like that. But it was just like, how can we sort of like reveal Cora at the end? Because it's also like sort of not normal to not have the product logo anywhere when you land on a landing page. But we kind of like wanted to do like a grand reveal by sort of like starting with the problem and just talking about the problem. And for those that feel like they can relate to that problem, which I feel like a lot of people do, then you might want to keep reading and see what is this all about. And eventually what's really cool about this design is that like the page is sort of like overlaying on top of like the product and like the actual like big takeaway, which is this. And it's like we're actually like revealing it out of thin air, which I actually really love a lot.
Totally. And why don't you log in? Because I think you did another like amazing job too on the actual like design UX of the application. And what I think people may not know is like this is like one of your first forays into designing web applications at all, which is kind of crazy. So you just logged in. We're looking at the Cora page. And basically what you're looking at, or we're looking at, is what we call a brief. So the way Cora works is when emails come into your inbox, it decides whether or not you need to respond. If you need to respond, it makes it to your inbox. If not, we automatically archive them and then send you a beautiful brief twice a day that summarizes everything you need to know. And so this is your brief, and it's still got that kind of like same sort of like sunny background. It's got like nice little summaries. Tell us about visually like what you're seeing, how you thought about this.
well, like this already looks so much different than like Gmail, right? Like
Yeah.
this already feels like oh, I'm like in the middle of spring and I'm like outside at the park, you know. So I think like a lot of those decisions from a design point of view sort of like came out from like this vision of like let's make it delightful, you know. And we really wanted to like lean on the those old sort of like impressionist type of oil canvas like paintings and things like that. So you'll see like a lot, like you'll see like the brush strokes in the back if you log in and things like that, which I think like I find that like super awesome. And I love to see that even like on an actual painting when I see it in the real world, being able to like see those tiny details. And what's actually really cool is that like in the future we're planning on like actually being able to have like a lot of different backgrounds, and like it could change depending on like the time of day or the seasons or like where even you are in the world. But what's kind of cool too is that like if you shift to the afternoon, you'll get to see like another kind of like enlarged upscaled painting that it's more akin to like the nighttime or the afternoon time. And we're trying to like find little moments like this throughout the app to kind of like keep telling this story, you know. And that's, I think like that's something that we didn't touch upon that I think is also like driving a lot of these decisions, is that we're talking about Cora as sort of like this way to read email as a story, or at least like as a narrative, or that there is like some cohesiveness with it. And we really even for like the video, the launch video and all of that, like we took a lot of inspiration of stories and storytelling, and like we wanted to like how make it as visual as possible, and like how stories are visual and like you can like pass the pages and like absorb a lot. I think like that's a lot of what we wanted to do here, that like this is a website that you look forward to open just because it looks pretty, you know.
Beautiful. I feel it. I love looking at it every day. It's the best. And it's so fun to get to work on it together, because I feel like every time we get on the phone, we're going to come up with something really cool. And I don't know where it's going to go, but sometimes it sucks, but it's often pretty delightful.
Yeah. I also think like to your point, like this is again one of the first times that like I'm actually jumping into like product design and things like that, just because I come as I said from advertising, so I was mostly doing like brand and stuff like that for a while. But I think like that, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it has given me like a difference, which is like, oh, I come at it from like more of an art direction perspective first, which I don't know if it's like the right way or if there's even a right way, who knows? But like I try to come at least to these things or each project as to like what is the general vibe, right? Versus versus start with like rectangles, you know what I mean? Like we start first with like vibe, and then the vibe slowly becomes the rectangles, versus the rectangles later getting like accent colors or whatever.
Yeah. But it's not just vibe. I think vibe encapsulates it, but I really like the word art direction. Like I haven't actually even thought about that, but I think art direction goes with the sort of maximalist vibe. Like you don't need an art director for a minimalist website. You just need to make rectangles.
Maybe.
Like, I don't know. Art direction, it just feels to me like for magazines or like, you know, something that has a lot of visual components. And I really like that as a way of thinking about what designers may need to incorporate into their practice more going forward, given the new tools like that make art direction accessible, even if you're a small team.
100%. I think you hit it in the nail. I think like, I think this even goes back to like you wrote a piece about like how we're moving into the allocation economy and how we're all becoming managers. And like at the end of the day, like an art director, you're like directing the art, you're like managing it now. You're not just pushing the pixels, but you're sort of like putting the hat of a creative director and like trying to like push a vision through, you know. And I think like that's a lot of what we're trying to do here as well. Just see how we can kind of like stand out, but in a way like guide the process in this way. And I think like art direction will become more important as it becomes easier to just like generate UI go, you know. When that happens, the world, like, you've heard of like AI slop, and like the web is just gonna be more filled with like things that were just generated on the fly and not refined. But I'm not like super excited about a world without refinement. You know, I am very excited about the collaboration with like the tools and like the models and things like that. So I think like being able to like have a vision, or at least a direction that you want to like guide the work that you're doing, that you know you want to go to, it's like everything you need as for the map for like whatever decision you're making. And I think like if you're a designer and you noticed that and you get scared because you know, you can just now generate UIs and things like that, I think it's way more important to like be in tune with like what you find beautiful about day-to-day things, you know, and like actually like start honing on that art direction of things. Because then you'll see the entire thing as a breathing, living thing that can sort of like change and get adapted depending on like what type of vibe you're feeling to kind of like represent with your design. So I do think like there is something really special about like putting more attention into like what is the art direction of something, which is something, as you said, is normally more reserved for like advertising purposes. You know, like when you're making an ad or when you're making like something for print or like a TV commercial, you're thinking about like, oh, what clothes are they going to be wearing, or like what's the background or things like that. You know. But I think like in the same way, like all of these elements have to like work together in a way that feels cohesive and feels art directed.
I love that. I could not have said it better myself. And I think that is actually a great place to leave people. Lucas, this is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to follow you and find you on the internet, where can they find you?
You can find me on X under Lucas__Crespo, or you can find me on the Every site, and you can connect with me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir. I would love to have you back soon.
Yeah, hopefully we have a lot of new designs to talk about soon.
I'm sure we will.
Oh my gosh, folks, you absolutely positively have to smash that like button and subscribe to AI and I. Why? Because this show is the epitome of awesomeness. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard, but instead of gold, it's filled with pure, unadulterated knowledge bombs about ChatGPT. Every episode is a roller coaster of emotions, insights, and laughter that will leave you on the edge of your seat, craving for more. It's not just a show. It's a journey into the future with Dan Shipper as the captain of the spaceship. So do yourself a favor, hit like, smash subscribe, and strap in for the ride of your life. And now, without any further ado, let me just say, Dan, I'm absolutely, hopelessly in love with you.